Untappable. If you're not grateful, you'll be grateful. These are the come from Prabhu.
Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjalisalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Sacharini Vishveshna Shunyavadi Aschakriteshitarini Vanchakalpatarubhascha Kripasindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavadebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Grateful to be here with all of you today. Let's discuss this verse on which we will speak today. So these three verses, 4:16 to 18, broadly talk about karma. So karmanya, that means in karma, within karma, akarma, no reaction. Yah pashed is to see. Karmanya akarma yah pashed. And conversely, akarmani, in inaction, cha karma yah, that one sees karma in akarma. Akarmani cha karma yah.
Akarmani cha karma yah.
Sir, that person, buddhiman, that person is wise among people, manusheshu, among human beings. Sabuddhiman manusheshu.
Sabuddhiman manusheshu.
Sa yuktaha. Such a person is not just buddhiman, intelligent, but well situated. Yuktaha means connected, engaged in yoga, and connected harmoniously. Sa yuktaha, and such a person can stay well connected even while krutsna karma krut. Even if the person is doing various kinds of work. Krutsna actually is everything. A person may do various kinds of work, but that person will stay spiritually connected. Sayuktaha krutsna karma krit.
Sayuktaha krishna karma krit.
Karmanya karma yah pashe.
Karmanya karma pashe.
Akarmani cha karma yah.
Akarmani cha karma yah.
Sabuddhiman manusheshu.
Sabuddhiman manusheshu.
Sayuktaha krutsna karma krit.
Sayuktaha krishna karma krit.
Together once. Karmani karma yah pashe.
Akarmani cha karma yah. Sabuddhiman manusheshu. Sayukta krishna karma krit.
So, what is exactly being said in this verse? If we consider, so I'll use this as a whiteboard for writing some things. The Gita is spoken by Krishna to Arjuna, and many of the verses can make better sense when we look at them in the context of the Gita. So Krishna is sitting over here, karmanya and akarma. So let's look at first the meanings. What karma and akarma. So literally, karma can mean action, and akarma can mean no action. That is one meaning. But that's not the only meaning. Karma can mean reactionary work, or I'll just use reactionary. Reactionary has a different meaning, but here it means work that gives reaction, work that entangles. And akarma can mean non-reactionary work that does not give reactions. So basically, the same words can mean multiple things. If you consider karmanya akarma iha pashed. akarmani cha karmaya. So, if you look at the verse, what Krishna is saying with this light, karmanya akarma yaha pashyed. That means what Krishna is saying is, so literally, if you take it, the word does not make sense. To see action in inaction and inaction in action. It twists the tongue and it twists the brain. It's difficult to understand. But karmanya akarma yaha pashyed. So actually, to make sense of the verse, we have to look at meanings this way. Karmanya akarma yaha pashyed. That one who sees that that action can be such that there is no reaction to that action. That one who sees, so 4:18, if you consider A, what it means is action leads to no, there can be action that can lead to no reaction. So for example, if there is a criminal doing around on a shooting spree, and police comes and shoots the criminal. Normally killing someone is a crime, but in this case, killing is not a crime. That's because that killing is for a higher purpose. There is action that will lead to no reaction. And conversely, you can have no action that will lead to reaction. Now, how can no action lead to reaction? Same situation. If a criminal is on a shooting spree and a police stands there doing nothing.
This happened a year ago. I don't know if you know.
Oh, that whole Derek Chauvin.
Uvalde, Texas. Yeah. They did.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's sometimes just many of these, sometimes if say upheaval, if riots or upheavals or this thing is conducive for one political party and then they will just get the police to silence. We'll not get into the specifics of that, but it happens.
It was in a school. It was a school shooting and the...
Oh, okay, that one, yeah. The police were waiting for something, they thought that whatever they thought. Yeah, it was terrible, I remember that in Uvalde, yeah. It's horrible. So there's no, I think severe action was taken against the police at that time. At least it should have been taken. So no action can make one culpable. So in the context of Arjuna, this immediately means that Arjuna can be fighting, and because he's fighting Dharma Yuddha, still he will not get any reaction, even if he's fighting against his relatives. He's fighting for the cause of virtue. He's fighting for establishing Dharma in the world. And conversely, if he does not fight, he may say, I will do nothing. But because he's meant to be a protector of society, if he, by doing nothing, he's failing in his duty of protecting. And therefore, he will get reaction. And one who understands this, that what will produce reaction and what will not produce reaction, that is not determined solely by the externals of the action. Such a person is wise. And such a person will not get entangled even if that person engages in various kinds of work. So in the context of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's fear was always entanglement. So we could say wise action is basically engagement without entanglement. How can one be engaged without being entangled? That is the key question of the Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna is asking, and Krishna answers that over here. So with this context, now let's see how these Bhagavad Gita's teachings apply to the Mahabharata. In many ways, the Mahabharata demonstrates what is taught in the Bhagavad Gita. Although the Mahabharata is so much more dramatic, that sometimes the philosophical undertones, the underlying philosophical themes may get lost, but they are very much there. Because the Bhagavad Gita is not just philosophy. The Bhagavad Gita is philosophy for ethical purposes. Its philosophy is the nature of reality. Ethics is the nature of right and wrong action. So the Bhagavad Gita is, you could say, philosophy for ethical decision making. It's for ethics. So to know what is the right thing to do, we have to have a right understanding of what exists. The Gita is not primarily a philosophical book. Yeah, it is a philosophical book, no doubt. But the context is It's not that suddenly in the middle of the battlefield Arjuna wants to do some philosophy. Arjuna has an ethical dilemma. And from that ethical dilemma, to address that, Krishna takes a discussion with the philosophical level. So, the Mahabharata may not directly seem to be talking about ethics. Sorry, not about philosophy. But the Mahabharata does talk about ethics. So, in one sense, you could say, in the Gita is philosophy that leads to ethics. Whereas the Mahabharata is, in one sense, ethics that leads to philosophy. So the ethical deliberation is much more in the Mahabharata. And underlying the drama, there is constantly this question, what is the right thing to do? So we have been discussing the life of Karna, Karna's karma, when good people do bad things. So now we discussed till now in the previous two sessions how Karna was a good person, but in trying to please Duryodhana. Duryodhana, who had given him inclusion in the elite circle of Kshatriyas, and where Karna very much wanted to belong. So in trying to please that Duryodhana, Karna started doing wrong things. First, there was consent. And then after that, there was instigation. His consent was when the Kauravas came to burn the Pandavas. His instigation was he instigated the idea of disrobing Draupadi. So there was the degeneration of Karna that was happening. So now we move on towards the later part of his life. So the Pandavas went to the forest for 12 years, then 1 year of incognito exile. Many things happened that which were relevant to Karna also, but we won't go into that. Then after that, there is the Udyoga Parva. The Udyoga Parva in the Mahabharata, Udyoga means industry or activity, industrious activity. So in this, the Pandavas were mainly doing two things. It's prepare for the worst and try for the best. So try for the best means they were trying for a peaceful solution. So prepare for the worst means that they were forming alliances so that if a war happened, they would be ready. So now in that trying for the worst, the last attempt was Krishna going as the peace messenger. Now when Krishna, this was, you could say that practically, if you this is the war starting from here. Krishna's peace mission was probably the major event before the war. Now in this peace mission, that was primarily Krishna speaking to Duryodhana. As he came as a peace messenger, initially he was speaking to Dhritarashtra. And Dhritarashtra said, I am convinced, you convinced my son. And Duryodhana was completely adamant. He just refused. What was his statement which finally just broke the peace negotiations?
I won't even give the land the size of a pinhead.
Yes, I want to give enough land to put the tip of a needle through. Pinhead is the more efficient way of putting it. Yeah, enough to put the tip of a needle through. Now, if that had been the age of Instagram, if this would have been an Insta reel viral, I won't give enough land to put even the tip of a needle through. Now, it's a nice dialogue, but what does it mean in the context? Suppose we invite someone for a program and they don't want to come. Now they make an excuse. Now they are making an excuse. We know that they are making an excuse, and they know that we know that they are making an excuse. But still, out of politeness, they are making an excuse. But imagine if they say, even if I die, my dead body will never come to your program. is not just a refusal of the invitation. That is a kick in the face of the inviter. Isn't it? So Duryodhana's rejection was like that. There was just no chance for peaceful resolution at that time. Once I was trying to do mediation between two people, and the first person was a little conciliatory. He said, I know you are very angry with me. Can you tell me what have I done that has angered you so much? And the first person said, you exist. If we start on that note, then any resolution is almost impossible. So, Duryodhana's reply was like that. And then Krishna became very grave. Krishna said to the entire assembly, O Kuru elders, you have seen with your own eyes the king of the Kurus saying that he has no power over his son. You have seen that son reject all efforts for peace. You bear testimony that he is the cause of this war. Now, when Krishna was returning, while Krishna was leaving the assembly, he left with Satyaki, with whom he had come, and Krishna sent a message to Karna that I want to talk with you. That's interesting. In the Mahabharata, there are not many depictions of interactions between Krishna and Karna directly. They might have casually met and talked, but there are no direct interactions of any significant note between Krishna and Karna. This is the first major interaction. And there are not many indications of Karna ever being averse to Krishna. Karna had a strong sense of rivalry towards Arjuna, and Karna had a very strong sense of affinity or faithfulness towards Duryodhana. So in that sense, he was already pitted against Krishna. But he had never directly spoken against Krishna. He had never demonized or blasphemed or he had not. Now whether he was on board with Duryodhana's plan to have Krishna arrested. Now yes, by that time Karna recognized that he has practically no control over Duryodhana. So he didn't support it. Among the warriors, among the soldiers who attempted to arrest Krishna, Karna was not among them. Karna was there. Now he was in the same kingdom. So when Krishna wanted to meet Karna, Karna was intrigued. Karna respected Krishna as a great warrior, as a great strategist. He killed many demons. Now Karna didn't really consider Krishna to be God. For him, he was naturally attracted to Surya. And he would worship Surya Deva every day. And he knew that there is some higher being. But he knew that some people thought that Krishna was God. See, even in those times, even when the Agra Puja was performed, not that everyone accepted Krishna as God. So, Karna had no aversion to Krishna, nor did he have any devotion to Krishna. So it is more like a neutral meeting. And the next morning, when they met, Krishna and Satyaki were together. So Krishna told Satyaki that Karna came on his chariot. And Krishna told Satyaki, he indicated Satyaki got out of the chariot. He went on Karna's chariot. And Karna came on Krishna's chariot. And then they were moving along. And they were talking. So Krishna cut to the chase quickly. Krishna said, "O Karna, a war is going to happen now. And Duryodhana is doomed. He is going to be destroyed. But you don't have to die with him. I have come on behalf of the Pandavas. And I invite you to come on the side of the Pandavas." not only will this save your life, but this will give you what you have always longed for. The Pandavas will accept you not just as an ally, not just as a friend, as an inferior friend, the way Duryodhana has accepted you. The Pandavas will accept you as their eldest brother. And by this time, you, he said, are the son of Kunti, born before her marriage to Suryadev. And in different renditions of the Mahabharata, there is some difference whether this was the first time Karna came to know about this. It is said that Kunti met him before in some renditions. So let's go with that. So Karna replies, I know about that. He said, that will not weaken my resolve to be with Duryodhana till the last moment. Krishna's face could show question. What are you thinking? So he says, oh Krishna, what you know, what you say is true. I know that Duryodhana is going to die. That the Gandiva, that the gambling dice that Shakuni threw at the Pandavas is going to come back as arrows from the Gandiva of Arjuna. Bhima will kill Duryodhana. I saw in a dream that Duryodhana was dressed in black and he was shaven completely and he was being dragged on a chariot drawn by donkeys toward the lower regions. And I saw Yudhishthir bedecked in white, ornamented and adorned, sitting on a chariot drawn by shining white horses rising upwards. I know this means that Yudhishthir is going to be victorious. And he said, Heat, I have been raised as a Sudra. The parents who cared for me throughout their life, I cannot disown them now. The friend who supported me in my time of need, I cannot abandon him now. He has fought this war based on his confidence in my support. I cannot let him down. Although my cause is doomed, I will fight by the side of Duryodhana. Now the discussion went on further, but let's analyze Karna's reasons. And not just analyze his reasons, let's try to analyze his reasoning. Underline the reasons. So here, at one level, we can say there are the Pandavas and there are the Kauravas. So now Karna is here among the Kauravas and Krishna is telling him, come over to this side and you will be here, not just a member but the leader. So at this point, let's look at, before we look at Karna's reasoning, let's look at Krishna's reasoning. Some people say Krishna allured Karna because he was afraid of Karna. He was afraid for Arjuna's safety. That could be possible. But if we look at it, just look at the timeline itself. This is, the Kurukshetra war is going to start. But just before the Kurukshetra war, there will be another war, that was the war at Virat. And after that, there are several months, there had been a negotiation. This war was a very short war. But in this Virat war, Arjuna had thoroughly defeated Karna. Arjuna had clearly established his superiority over Karna. In fact, you could say all the odds were in Karna's favor. In the sense that Karna had an entire army with him. Arjuna was all alone. And yet Arjuna defeated Karna at that. Karna tried twice and both times he failed. Now we could say that Karna didn't have the Shakti Astra at that time. Well, okay, that may be true and we'll discuss that a little later. But the fact was that Krishna, that it was not so much for Arjuna's safety. But there have been several encounters between Krishna and Arjuna and Karna, and not once had Karna got the better of Arjuna. Right from the Swayamvar, where Karna had not participated or failed in hitting the target. After that, when there had been a fight, I won't go into this entirely in detail, but several encounters had happened where Karna had never been able to prove his superiority over Arjuna. So, was Krishna concerned about Arjuna's safety? Of course. Was Krishna afraid of Karna for Arjuna's safety? Not really. Krishna was on a mission to avoid war. When that mission had failed, Krishna thought, okay, the war cannot be avoided, let its scale be minimized. Now, among the leaders on the Kaurava side, we consider Duryodhana was there. Then there was Bhishma, Drona, Kripa. Bhishma and Drona were there. They were all big names. Karna was a big name. Dushasana was a big name. But among these, actually, no one had any strong antipathy, strong hatred towards the Pandavas. The only person with hatred toward the Pandavas was Duryodhana. The Bhishma and Drona, they didn't want to fight. Now Dushasana is an interesting character. Dushasana had done something terrible. He had tried to dishonor Draupadi. But he also knew how ferocious Bhima was. And when Krishna talked about the power of Bhima and Arjuna during his peace mission, Krishna tried Sam, Dam, Bhed and Danda. So at that time, Dushasana became terrified because Dushasana remembered what Bhima had said. They rip out his arm and drink his blood and kill him. So Dushasana said, no, if Duryodhana doesn't listen to Krishna and hand the Pandavas over there, half the kingdom, let us all arrest Duryodhana, tie him up and hand him over to Keshav. Now Duryodhana looked at Dushasana, how can you betray me like this? Dushasana was saying, my life is more important than your pride. He didn't say that, but that's what he was thinking. But then, for all the other 98 brothers, this was an unprecedented sight. The two biggest brothers, they had never fought, publicly differed. So when Duryodhana, whenever things were not going his way during the peace discussion, he would just walk out. So many politicians in India, they stage a walk out. So they are following Duryodhana Parampara. So he just walked out. And then all the other brothers were left. And they look at Dushasana, they look at Duryodhana. Whom should we follow? Now they had all followed Duryodhana because Dushasana also followed Duryodhana. And actually Duryodhana is they all knew how dangerous Duryodhana could be. If we follow some people because we are inspired to please them. And we follow some people because we are scared to displease them. So, the remaining brothers were like that. So they knew how crossing Duryodhana could be terrible. So, they undecided, but slowly, one by one, all of them walked out. Now, Dushasana was left all alone. And looked like everybody in the assembly was looking at the spectacle, they were looking at him. And then he also walked away. And then he hesitantly moved towards the room where Duryodhana was talking with all his other brothers. And Duryodhana was expert. He was a politician. So he heard Dushasana's footsteps coming. he spoke, this, he started speaking to his brothers, this Krishna is very cunning. The way he speaks, anybody's intelligence can be stolen by his speech, isn't it? You have to be careful. Just look at Dushasan. Hey Dushasan, wasn't your intelligence stolen by Krishna? Yeah, that's what happened. So, Duryodhana, the expert, he gave Dushasan a way to save face. He didn't humiliate him. But the point was, Dushasan was also not that antagonistic. So the only person who was antagonistic was Duryodhana. And Duryodhana's confidence, Duryodhana had the confidence that I can fight Bhima and Karna can take on Arjuna. And if those two can be taken, then other warriors are not a big deal. But if Karna was removed from Duryodhana's side, that would be like breaking the back of Duryodhana. Either Duryodhana would settle for a peaceful resolution, or even if a war happened, it would not go on for so long. So Krishna was either on a war prevention or a war minimization mission. And it was a part of that mission that Krishna talked with Karna. So Krishna's reasoning was very clear. Now, why did Krishna go so far as to offer Karna the kingship? Because Krishna knew Yudhishthira. He knew Arjuna. Arjuna had a great rivalry with Karna. But if Pandavas knew this was their eldest brother, they would immediately defer to him. They would respect. They would respect Krishna's words and they would respect the sanctity of the relationship. So he had that confidence. And that's why Krishna made this proposal. Now this proposal would be a great loss for Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira had been the king, the emperor of the world. And now he would go down. Now Karna, this was Krishna's reasoning. Now what was Karna's reasoning over here? Karna broadly talks about two reasons. One is from his family perspective and second from his friendship perspective. He said that I was raised by Adhiratha and Radha. Now just because I have the allurement for a kingdom, can I disown them? Well, nobody was asking him to disown his parents. Krishna himself had two sets of parents. When Krishna returned to Vasudeva and Devaki, he was not disowning Yashoda and the Maharaj. It was the call of duty that required him to go there. And Karna could have had two sets of parents. And Karna could have used his royal wealth to take care of his parents better also. It was a child a child who is adopted, finding out who his or her birth parents are, does not mean that the child is rejecting the parents who raised them. So that is very flimsy reasoning. Now we may say that, okay, some people try to say that he rejected the caste system. That the caste system is that your defining identity is determined by your birth. And he rejected that by staying with the family that raised him. Well, that was not his motivation. That was not his thinking at all. Because all along he wanted to belong to Kshatriyas. So if he didn't have that caste consciousness, now why would he try so desperately to belong to the Kshatriya group? Isn't it? So we can give our interpretations from current narratives, but that is not applicable over there. So now let's look at his second reason. He said that I have given my word to Duryodhana. And I cannot give up that word. Okay. So this raises a very important question. That is gratitude meant to be conditional or unconditional? If someone does something good for us, we feel grateful to that person. But what does that gratitude imply? When Karna was held by Duryodhana, and when on receiving Angadesh, Karna made the promise that I will always be the friend of Duryodhana. At that time, we could have given him the benefit of the doubt. He had been benefited by Duryodhana. And on top of that, he had not been exposed to Duryodhana's shenanigans, Duryodhana's wicked deeds. The Pandavas themselves had not exposed any of that. Although they had been they had felt the brunt of it. So, but later on he saw with his own eyes what Duryodhana was capable of. He saw not only that what Duryodhana was doing to the Pandavas was heinous, he also saw that the effect of Duryodhana on his character was terrible. In trying to please Duryodhana, he had lost himself, at least temporarily during the gambling match and its aftermath. So now when this happened, at this point, he made his word to Duryodhana as his prime factor for decision making. So here Karna had a choice. Karna's choice was the word of honor or a life of honor. In honoring your word, if somebody is being forced to do dishonorable deeds, and not just one deed, but constant dishonorable deeds, then what should such a person be doing? In the Islamic world, Pakistan and Afghanistan are among the poorest countries. Of course, some parts of Africa are poor. Relatively speaking, in the Gulf, there's a lot of wealth because of petrol and because of natural gas. So now suppose there's a poor child in Pakistan who is starving, and some people come along and they say, we will feed you, we will clothe you, we will take care of you, we will educate you. You will feel grateful. I would have died without you. So I'm so grateful to you. And then as he grows up, he finds that the people who are taking care of him are jihadis. That they're out to kill people in mass, kill people indiscriminately. And they are training him to become a similar killer. Now when he comes to know what they are doing, what they are doing to make him do. Now, does his gratitude to them for having saved his life imply that he has to become a killer for them? He has to take life for them? Gratitude is important. But gratitude, again, one virtue cannot be made the supreme virtue. So, here, his reasoning was wrong. Okay, I have given my word to Duryodhana. Okay, you gave your word, but in what context? In what context? Is that context applicable today? If that context is not applicable today, then are you bound by that word right now? So he considered, not only how can I give up my word? Well, yes, after make a promise, not giving up a promise. We shouldn't just be casually making promises and just neglecting promises. That will make people lose trust in us. If we make a commitment, we should stick to it in general. But there are extenuating circumstances. And if there was ever an extenuating circumstance, it was here. Even if he didn't accept Krishna to be God, that's fine. He didn't accept Krishna to be God, but still, the reasoning was there for him. But he wanted to be a Kshatriya. A Kshatriya is one who fights to protect. Duryodhana had been attacking those whom he was part of the family, whom he was meant to protect. And yet for him to stick by the side of Duryodhana was an understandable decision, but it was a terrible decision. It might seem principled, but if one principle makes one give up all other principles, then that principle is something which maybe we should not have such unquestioned devotion to. If in order to stick to my friendship, I have to become a liar, I have to be a killer, I have to become a murderer, I have to become all kinds of terrible persons, I have to give up all boundaries, then that is a terrible miscalculation. So the Mahabharata says that Karna's biggest mistake was his misdirected loyalty. It is good to be loyal, but it is important to consider whom we are being loyal to. So that's why one of the themes in the Mahabharata is that there is virtue and there is object of virtue. And virtues don't exist in isolation. Virtues exist in relation. Now, humility is a virtue, but humility is primarily seen through actions. It is very easy, or it is relatively easy to be humble with people who are humble. Isn't it? But it is especially difficult to be humble with people who are arrogant. So now our humility or lack is seen primarily in interaction. So now in some cases we try to be humble and the other person tries to walk over us. Then we can still be humble, but the external expression of humility will have to be different. So virtue always exists in relationship with others. Virtue is, the idea of virtue, it is not in isolation. It is in relation. So now we may say, of course, is virtue in isolation? Well, yes, but it is like some people have humility within them. That's a samskar within them. But it is manifested, not just manifested through their actions, it's also developed through the actions. When it's a difficult person to maintain humility, our humility grows by that. So virtue exists in isolation, but it also exists in relation. And if a particular expression of humility is being abused by someone, then we have to change. We may still be humble, but with humbly we may not be deferential. We may not just submit to their will. We may strongly express our will. So similarly, gratitude is important. But gratitude doesn't just simply mean doing what the other person tells us to do, or doing what the other person wants us to do, or doing what we had promised the other person will do. Gratitude means doing what is good for the other person. This brings us to the critical mistake in Karna's logic, with which we'll conclude that Karna, he says, Duryodhana has decided to wage this war based on his confidence in me. How can I let him down? So he was entirely letting Duryodhana set the terms of the relationship. That Duryodhana will decide what will be Karna's role and what will constitute Karna's letting him down. Would Karna actually be letting him down? Not necessarily. No, if Karna had decided not to fight, that could have at one level antagonized Duryodhana, enraged Duryodhana. Duryodhana might have felt betrayed, might have called Karna a traitor. But what would have happened is that Duryodhana would most likely have called off the war. Without Karna, he would not have had the confidence. And that could have saved Duryodhana's life. So he could have been the well-wisher of Duryodhana also by not being with Duryodhana. So sometimes friendship requires hard choices. Hard choices which may even displease the friend. Karna did not do that. So it's because his loyalty was misdirected, that led to both his and Duryodhana's destruction. Now, a less charitable view of Karna's actions could be that Karna was always very reputation conscious, very fame conscious, and he did not like the optics of the situation. That just before the war, the Pandavas allured him with a kingdom, and he left his friend at that time. And now that would have seemed that he had been tempted, he had been bought over with the promise of a kingdom. It could have seemed like that. And that could have caused him to refuse it. Now, he was always very conscious of his reputation. Even when Kunti had come before, Kunti had begged him, don't fight this war. And he said that I have always been with Duryodhana, I will be with Duryodhana. At that time, Kunti did not ask him for anything. Kunti just wanted to save his life. She didn't want any of her sons to die. Some people say that Kunti came to her so that she could save her son's life. No, Karna was also her son. It was he himself, he said that anyone who comes to me for a favor, they will never go empty-handed. He said, I will give you the favor, you love your sons, you will always have 5 sons. I will not kill anyone except Arjuna. Either he will kill me or I will kill him. But he will always have 5 sons. But that was what, you could say that's a good thing that he made a promise like that. But that was not what Kunti had asked. He gave that promise because he always wanted to maintain that reputation. That anybody who asks charity from me, that person will never go empty-handed. Similarly, when Indra came and asked for his kavach and kundal, it's an extraordinary act of charity that he gave his kavach and kundal. But again, was it really an act of charity? Because he knew that even Indra had a reputation to maintain. When Indra got something so big from him, Indra would have to give something in return. And what did Karna ask for? The Shakti Astra. The weapon that could kill Arjuna. Now, in one sense, was it really charity? It was more like a deal. It might not have started off like a deal. It started off as a charity, but it was a deal. And from Karna's perspective, his lifelong mission was to defeat Arjuna. In defeating Arjuna would be his glory. So he lost a kavach. The kavach meant that he would not be killed. But the kavach did not guarantee him in any way that he would be able to kill Arjuna. So he lost, for everyone their life is dear, no doubt. But for Karna, his life's purpose was to establish, to prove his superiority over Arjuna. And he lost one thing which would have protected his life, but he gained something which would have fulfilled what was the driving mission of his life. So again, he maintained his reputation of being charitable. So that could have been a part of his calculations. He doesn't mention that in his reasoning with Krishna. But Krishna says, "Oh Arjuna, Duryodhana does not deserve your loyalty." That, he says, Duryodhana is not a person worthy of such friendship. If you stick to him, you will be destroyed. Karna said, I cannot leave Duryodhana. And Krishna pulled Karna into a hug and they parted and he said, then our next meeting will be on the battlefield. So this was a decision that Karna very consciously made. In the sense that he chose Duryodhana even when he had been given everything, both from an ethical perspective, from a financial perspective, from a familial perspective, everything. It was for him to come to this. Ethically, because the Pandavas were virtuous. Familiarly, because he was a part of the Pandava family. Financially, he would be the king. Socially, he would not have to depend on Duryodhana's favor to be a part of the Kshatriya family. He would already have done that. So Krishna could not have done anything more to prevent, to persuade Karna. Krishna tried everything first to persuade Duryodhana, going to the level of even 5 villages. So here, what Krishna offered Karna was ethically, familiarly, financially, socially. It was all of them were moved to the Pandavas, moved to the Pandava side. And yet for him, his converse attachment to Duryodhana superseded everything else. So if we use a contemporary example, there are often addicts and there are enablers of the addicts. So suppose somebody is an alcoholic and they drink and they get a lot of trouble with the law, they get a lot of trouble with friends, they make a mess of their life. And after every episode, it happens, maybe they have a sibling, a brother, a friend, a brother comes and cleans up the mess every time. Pacifies the people, pays the fine, and keeps fixing things for them. Now, in one sense, they will say that the brother will be saying, I'm doing this out of my love for my brother. But actually, that love is making things worse. Sometimes the best way to protect a loved one is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. Normally, love means, okay, even if you have done something wrong, I'll protect you. If a child has made some mess, you will say the neighbor is yelling at the child, okay. Some damage, I'll pay for it. That's what parents will actually say. So one aspect of love is to protect our loved ones from the consequences of our actions. But another aspect of love is to stop protecting. Protect from consequences of action. That is one aspect of love. But another aspect of love is to stop protecting. Let them get the consequences of their action. That is not hard-hearted, that is just clear-headed. Maybe that is the only way they will learn. Otherwise, they will not learn. So in this case, from this perspective, Duryodhana was addicted to power. And Karna unfortunately became his enabler. And Karna chose to stay as an enabler. And that became the cause of the destruction of both of them. So what we learn is that sometimes good people do bad things because they become uncritically attached to a bad person. And that is the tragedy of Karna's life. He's both heroic and tragic. He's heroic because he was so charitable, he was so formidable as an archer. He's tragic because he let his relationship with Duryodhana supersede everything else in his life. And that is his misfortune. So I'll summarize. So what we discussed today was 3 main points. I started by talking about what was Krishna's reasoning? Krishna's reasoning was to avoid war or minimize war. War is to be either avoided or minimized. So avoid by negotiating with Duryodhana, minimize by negotiating with Karna. And we discussed how nobody else in the Kaurava camp had any deep antipathy towards the Pandavas. Duryodhana had, Dushasana also had, but Dushasana had become apprehensive. So if Karna could be stopped, Karna could be pulled away from his side, the war could have been avoided or minimized. Now if you consider Karna's reasoning, there was two reasons. Family was a fairly flimsy reason. Now is friendship. Now in his friendship reason, we discussed how his mistake was that he chose the word of honor above the life of honor. So word of honor is important, gratitude is important, but no one virtue can become the supreme virtue. And to understand this, I give two examples of how. One was the unconditional gratitude is somebody who is a jihadi terrorist, somebody is raised by jihadis. That doesn't person have to become a jihadi. And we talk about the enabler of an addict. So unfortunately, Karna chose to be an enabler, and that caused his destruction. So if we study the Bhagavad Gita, study Krishna's message, and we get a holistic perspective of things, then we won't let any one virtue become the sole deciding factor for everything. So because there's virtue, there's a goodness in the person. So what was happening for Arjuna, something similar was happening on the battlefield. He was letting the fact that these are my relatives become the sole deciding factor. Krishna said, yes, that's a factor, but that's not the sole factor. Don't let that one factor become everything. So, just as Karna, by coming on to Krishna's side, on the Pandava's side, would have done the right thing. Even if the world had seen him as a person who sold himself. So, karmanya akarmaya pashyet, akarmani cha karmaya. That by coming on the Pandava's side, Karna would have stayed free from karmic implication. Even if it might have, some people might have seen it to be the wrong thing. And by staying on the side of the Kauravas, it might have seemed the right thing to him, but that was the wrong thing. Sabuddhiman manusheshu. Arjuna heard Krishna's words, and Arjuna became buddhiman. Karna refused to hear Krishna's words, and he became buddhini. He lost his intelligence, and eventually he lost his life. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Are there any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I think we'll have to go back and listen. It was very thought-provoking. My question is more about application of what you said in our life. Oftentimes when we do the same thing, it's the story we tell ourselves, and that we are not recognizing when principles have to change. And when they do have to change, it becomes a question of are we losing our integrity when we change? So how do we not fall into that trap? We are too close in it to have introspection. So is it friends who will help us give that perspective? How do we recognize when things are changing and our principles have to change?
Yes.
Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, so sometimes we have made a particular decision, made a particular commitment, and then we consider whether we should not go ahead with that commitment. Then is it something we are doing for our convenience, or is it a matter of the principles themselves that change? How do we decide that? Yes, generally speaking, we need someone who we can trust. See, our judgment, ultimately we have to decide. Nobody else can do the decision making for us. But it is always helpful to have someone else who can give us objective notes. So, especially when we have a major commitment in our life, it's helpful to write down, okay, why am I doing this? And then we can look back, are those reasons still valid? So, writing our commitments and writing the rationale for our commitments helps us to stay committed firmly when firmness is required, and to also not become rigid, irrational. Because see, we could say there are principles and there are purposes. So every principle is for a purpose. Principles are for purposes. We want to say, for example, we follow various, we live according to some principles. Our purpose is ultimately to love Krishna and to attain Krishna. So in one sense, there are practices, principles and purposes. So for example, practice is chanting Hare Krishna. The principle is remember Krishna. The purpose is to develop love for Krishna. Now suppose somebody has some throat accident and they lose their voice. But the practice they can't do. But the principle they can still do. Principle is remember Krishna. And the purpose is to love Krishna. So now sometimes some people towards the end of their life they may like to hear Bhagavatam, some people might like to hear Bhagavad Gita, some people might like to hear Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. That's very the smaran is happening. The purpose is to develop love for Krishna. So practices are important, principles are even more important, purposes are the most important. So now if we have a written record of these things, in one sense we could, writing helps us to create an external reservoir of our intelligence. Our intelligence doesn't always act at the same level. It's like suppose, we could consider this is internal. Now inside us there is our intelligence. And outside us, say, some written statement of our commitments. So the nature of our intelligence is that suppose we have some money and we have some money just stored in some stocks, there it may go down and may go up, it's volatile. Then you would like to store at least some money in stocks just steadier. That will not go down. So our intelligence is like a volatile stock. Our intelligence sometimes goes up, sometimes goes down. It's not just our mind goes up and down, our intelligence also goes up and down. Our mind, putting stock in the mind is like putting in shares which are constantly going up and down. Our intelligence doesn't go up and down that fast, but still it goes up and down. Yeah. So, but this is more like a steady stock. So if we have written down our rationale, then we can evaluate it better. Okay, this was the reason why I was going to do this. Now let's see what's happening. And if you can consult someone else, especially consider this is the soul, this is the mind, and this is another person. Soul, mind, another person. Now if we have close relationship, it's for most people, when they speak something, it comes to our mind and often it goes out of our mind. This doesn't make sense to me. I can't accept that. But that's true, that's understandable. We can't really take every person's every opinion very seriously. But if we know somebody is a well-wisher, so soul, mind, and you could say here is the, yeah, it's not bad. It's a person who cares for us, so it's okay. So here the other is a well-wisher. So if that person is close to us, then on one side we evaluate our mind and then we evaluate what the other person is saying. So we need to have someone who is close to us. That's why this is the meaning of like-minded. Like-minded association, like-minded friend, like-minded guide. So if we have that, then rather than evaluating that person through our mind, we evaluate that person and we evaluate our mind. So that helps us in decision making. Okay. Yes.
So, thank you for the wonderful class. I'm sorry I missed your previous two classes about Karna. So you may have mentioned something about this in the previous classes, but what you talked about today were the justifications that Karna himself spoke when he was asked about what he was doing. But the sort of seed of this was that in the archery contest that the Pandavas, or specifically Arjun, said, he's a son of a charioteer, he cannot be. And there was some resentment and envy because of that. So to what extent were his decisions actually due to the principles that he was speaking, or was it all a rationalization or a justification that was actually all due to his envy and resentment starting from that point?
Yeah, good question. So, was Karna, for him, were his principles what was motivating him, or was it resentment and envy of Arjuna because of he had not been allowed to compete, at least initially? He had not been able to excel. Well, it could be. generally speaking, when we go into a bit of analyzing people's motivations, it's unavoidable that we will do that because we want to understand people. But there is the tendency that our likes and dislikes play a big role in that. Means if I like someone and that person eats a lot, they must have been hungry. If I don't like someone and that person eats a lot, what a glutton! No sense control at all. So, no, somebody who does not like Karna, they can go, he's all acting out of envy. Somebody who likes Karna, they will say, he was simply acting out of friendship and principle and charity. He was being true to his friendship. Now what is it? Well, quite like the truth is somewhere in between. So let's go ahead, even if we take the most charitable explanation for his actions, which is what we did today, that he was motivated simply by friendship. But even then his reasoning was wrong. So we could analyze Karna's motivations at various levels. So the most positive would be friendship. It's like when we are trying to refute somebody, if we are really honest at argumentation, we consider their strongest argument. It's very easy to consider the weakest argument and consider them knocked out by that. But his friendship would be the most positive motive. The most negative would be envy. And somewhere in between would be reputation. So we could go about his motives in various spectrums. So this could also play a role. We can't be sure about that. Okay. Yes, please.
Would you not put integrity in here? Was it not the driving force of people of that age?
Integrity in the sense of sticking to one's word. Yes, that's the whole point.
No, I mean, I got your explanation, but like if we study our histories are integrity misplaced. Whether it's Bhishma, they gave word to somebody and they are following 3 generations later when the words mean nothing or when they are defeating the very purpose they were used. So how, but still at the end of the game, Krishna is at his bedside. So he is appreciating overall devotion and the ethical qualities. I'm giving a not apples to apples example, but integrity is something which is
Okay.
it stands out to me.
So you are using the word integrity not necessarily in a positive sense. You are saying that integrity is what motivated various characters and often that led to them making unhealthy commitments. Well, yes, that is true. The whole of Mahabharata begins, every book has a driving question. The Mahabharata's driving question is, what is dharma? What is the right thing to do? And there are various characters who are faced with dilemmas, and from today's perspective, we can say, Bhishma should have, why did he stay with Duryodhana? He should have come on to the side of the Pandavas. It's easy for us to say that. See, in life can be very confusing. It can be very complicated. And we all try to make sense of life by holding on to something. And that one thing, that anchor, that gives some strength, some stability, some sanity to us. So, we could say, if we consider life to existence in this world is like a turbulent ocean. So, ocean, within this, there's turbulence. So, when the turbulence is there, we all seek something strong, some anchor we can say. Some anchor we seek. Now, for people their commitment to their word, their integrity became their anchor. Integrity is a very good anchor. There are some anchors you hold on to them and then you drown. There are some anchors which hold you up for a significant amount of time. But still, the point is there are hierarchies of anchors. And yes, integrity is an important anchor. But then we see in that beautiful pastime, Krishna demonstrating a principle higher than integrity in terms of honoring one's word. Krishna had said, I will not raise any weapons. But when Arjuna was threatened, Krishna raised it. And that is celebrated. That is celebrated. So in one sense, Krishna demonstrates, we could say, morality that is pragmatist. Some people say in the name of no principles can be followed. Just do whatever you want, whatever works for you. Some people say no, even nothing works. I'm going to stick to those principles. But Krishna is a pragmatist. Pragmatist means he has a clear purpose, and principles are means to those purposes.
That's for spiritually evolved people who are connected. And those who are not spiritually evolved, they have to, as you said, hold on to something.
Yes, that is true. For spiritually evolved people, it would be, say, Krishna and service to Krishna. Even for somebody not spiritually evolved, there is a sense of hierarchy. Sattva guna is higher than Rajoguna. Rajoguna is higher than Tamoguna. So, even for let's consider addict and enabler of the addict. There will be no Krishna in their life, but they have to consider that I care for this person, but my very care for this person is becoming this person's enemy and it's become my enemy. So sometimes we may have to decide that in caring for this person, I am harming myself, and then I may have to stop that. So there is a hierarchy of principles for everything. So now, how do we decide that? That's not easy. So we could say one extreme is adhere always to some principle. The other would be don't care for any principle. Just do whatever works. In between, the pendulum would be follow principles for a higher purpose. And when that higher purpose is not being served by a principle, then at that time, one may have to decide whether this principle is to be followed or not. That is what the point of niyamagraha is. The niyamagraha is concerned about the obstacles. So, always stick to principle is niyam agraha. So, agraha. This would be niyam agraha. Agraha means insistence. Agraha means rejection. So, in between is understanding that the niyam is important, but the uddesh, the purpose, is more important. Does it answer your question?
It does. But it takes time.
Oh, of course. That's what dharma is. So I was telling that the Mahabharata begins with the question, what is dharma? And it ends with the last verses is Yudhishthira is contemplating what is dharma. So it's an exploration. It's not an easy answer. It is not. Yudhishthira has gone through this whole life. It is not easy. His life is difficult and we have to make decisions sometimes. It's very difficult to make the right decisions. Thank you. Yes, the last question.
So, Prabhu, you mentioned a point about gratitude, where gratitude doesn't mean that you do what the other person wants, but do what is right to do. Right. So, but in relationships, sometimes if you do what the other person wants, it may not be good for them. But if you do not do what the other person wants, the relationship may strain, it may go sour. So, what do you do in that case? How do we act on this?
Yeah. My purpose here is to raise questions, not give answers. I wish life had easy answers.
I have that one. I have that experience. So, see, that's
So-
life, right? When it happens in a relationship, I feel you need to give it time and a lot of communication. Just like in Gita, when all the time, Arjunji and other asking questions to Bhagwan Krishna, right? So he just keep explaining. So instead of disputing or arguing, I think in relationship it's the most important thing that I have gone through all that disaster, right? Ultimately I have learned you need to communicate a lot and you need to give a time. And you need to control your anger.
Thank you.
Other person could be taking 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, right? Doing the wrong thing. But you have to stay with them. I think in a relationship, follow them and show them the right path. Instead of quitting or doing claiming that person is doing wrong. No. Tell them what is the right instead of looking what is wrong. I think that's the most important thing in a relationship. So I think communication, I lacked the communication in my relationship. And it was a blunder, disaster. But ultimately, I think that is also I think all the destination is written by God, right? So
Okay.
what happened?
I think I have to interfere over here. Everything is not written by God.
No.
Let me complete now, please. Everything is not written by God. Our choices are our choices.
Yeah, no.
Our situations are determined by destiny to some extent, but not our choices. So, just to come back to your point, I would say 3 broad parameters. That first, certainly in any relationship, sometimes we do have to acknowledge that we may have to do something which we would normally not do. And yesterday I talked about boundaries. That when we start accommodating somebody, it's natural that in any relationship we may have to do, as I said, things which we don't want to do. But we need to define boundaries. That this is what I'm not going to do. For example, you take the addict and the enabler of the addict. Now, if the first sign somebody has become an addict and the family abandons them, that would be terrible. That is the time when they need their loved ones the most. So, just because somebody is having some difficulty, somebody is not just having some difficulty, somebody is doing something terrible, bad or terrible, that does not mean that they should be abandoned. But there has to be boundary which have to be defined. I can go this far to help. Because if we just keep going further and further and further, then the problem is that when help, it is from our side, helping the other person is kindness. But there is a thin difference between kindness and blindness. Kindness and blindness. That means if my kindness is actually not helping the other person, it is letting the other person continue to do what is wrong, then that kindness is actually blindness. Say, if somebody is an alcoholic and we keep giving them money, and they keep using that money not for education, not for getting training, not for doing anything responsible, just keep using the money for drinking more and more, then that kindness is blindness. So, there have to be some boundaries. I can help you with this, but not with this. If you are going through some issues, if you feel, say, withdrawal symptoms or this or that, I'm there to talk, I'm there to help. But I'm not going to give you money. Certain boundaries have to be set. If boundaries are not set, no boundaries means what will happen is, then the kindness will degenerate to blindness. That is important. If there is no boundaries, then after that, the first thing is set boundaries. Then after that, there is certain level of observation. It means, what is the person doing? Is the person going up or is the person going down? Sometimes some people have to go down and hit bottom before they rise up. That is true. But overall, we need to be observing that person. See, love can be unconditional, but a loving relationship cannot be unconditional. For a relationship to be there, there has to be some reciprocation. Isn't it? That's why we have the whole phenomenon of one-sided love. So now, if that other person is just going down, our love for that person is that we are there to help them. But there has to be some expression of reciprocal love from the other person. See, we can, when we are saying that we should have some boundaries in helping, what does it mean? We want to help the person rise. So who can be helped? The unable, those who are unable, they can be helped. Those who are unwilling, they can't be helped. So those who are unwilling, we have to sometimes, at that time, recognize. Now it's very difficult to know whether the person is unable or unwilling. And sometimes in real life, the boundaries may not be that clear. But everybody has some capacity to do something. You know, if somebody doesn't, there are 10 things which they could do improve, and they are doing 9 things opposite. But at